Right, well, let's head back to the Senzo Meyiwa trial, where the defense has suggested that the first police officers to arrive on the scene where Meyiwa was shot exposed the crime scene to contamination after failing to secure it immediately. The court yesterday heard evidence of Sergeant Patrick Mthethwa, who was the first to arrive at the scene with his colleague. Mthethwa is the second witness in the trial to take the stand. Let's chat now to our reporter at the High Court in Pretoria, Chriselda Lewis. Chriselda, a good morning to you. I think let's start off with a recap of what we heard from Sergeant Mthethwa in yesterday's proceedings.
Well, Naledi, let's start here. Some of the accused being brought up this morning for proceedings, of course, that will get underway at 10 o'clock this morning, as usual. And indeed, this morning we're expecting Advocate Zandile Mshololo, representing accused number 5, to begin her cross-examination of Sergeant Mthethwa. He's the second witness in this matter. He began taking the stand yesterday. And we're certainly now trying to get a glimpse of what some of the first responders to the crime scene in the form of police officers had done when they arrived at the scene. We heard from Sergeant Mthethwa yesterday that they received a call about a shooting over the radio at about 20:53 on that fateful day. It took them about between 8 to 10 minutes to arrive at the home of Gladness Khumalo, who is the mother of Kelly Khumalo. And when they arrived there, he says they met with a man who described himself as an uncle. His name was Temba. And they then proceeded to go inside the house, but very briefly. The house was opened by Temba, and when they got inside, he had noticed some bottles, or in fact some cans, 2 beer cans, according to what he has stated. That's what he realized was on the floor towards the dining room area. But he says they left in quite a rush because Temba had basically told them that someone had been shot and had been taken to hospital. Mthethwa then says they rushed to hospital, and on arrival there, fast forward from the gate inside, they had met with Ma Khumalo, who we now know is Gladness Khumalo, and then subsequently after that it was a nurse that had taken Sergeant Mthethwa and his colleague to a room where Senzo Meyiwa's body was lying on the bed, and he basically pointed towards this area, saying he had realized that this is where he had been shot. So he says then they left the hospital with Ma Khumalo, and on arrival the second time at the scene, they went inside. That's where they saw a hat on the floor. They also saw crutches, as well as some of these cans, the beer cans that he previously referred to. And certainly what also happened in cross-examination was that, for example, Titi Tobane, who is the instructing attorney for accused 1 to 4, asking him why did they rush off from the scene and not cordon it off the first time around. Recall, as I indicated, he said, Mthethwa had said they'd rushed off after briefly going into the house and had rushed to the hospital, where they were told that the victim had basically been shot, and that was without concealing the scene or cordoning it off the first time around. That came under scrutiny yesterday. So Titi Tobane basically accusing him of abandoning the scene, allowing for anything to take place, including contamination. But Mthethwa is adamant that he could not cordon off the scene at the time on the basis that they did not know what was happening. They wanted to get more information. The uncle that they found there, who said his name was Temba, basically didn't have much information about what had transpired. That was his defense about why they'd cordoned off the scene only the second time around, when they arrived at the house with Gladness Khumalo. Now, at this particular point, we're already also starting to pick up some contradictions, Naledi, in terms of some of the testimony that has been made. Recall that the state's first witness, the forensic detective Thabo Musia, had indicated that when he arrived at the scene, he had found Brigadier Johan Ndlovu there. And it was Brigadier Ndlovu who had basically told him where to take photographs and exhibit, and explain to him where to take some of these photos. But then again, you'd recall in Brigadier Ndlovu's statement, he says that he was not in charge of that scene, and basically he did not show Musia anything in terms of where to take photographs. So that had been the first contradiction. Another contradiction now, what we're hearing from Sergeant Mthethwa, is that Sergeant Mthethwa says, or describes in his testimony, saying that Musia had arrived first at the scene, and then he realized that the task team had arrived at the crime scene, and who he noticed to be amongst those who are arriving as forming part of that task team was this Brigadier Johan Ndlovu. So now that contradiction in that Musia says that he arrived at the scene, found Brigadier Ndlovu there. Brigadier Ndlovu was the one who showed him where to take some of these photographs and showed him the scene. And in this testimony now of Sergeant Mthethwa, he indicates that Musia arrived first, and then the task team did, and comprising part of that task team was Brigadier Johan Ndlovu. So we're expecting cross-examination, Advocate Zandile Mshololo to really, stick to some of those crucial aspects, including, remember, what has really been under scrutiny since this trial began is the manner in which police had responded, when they responded, how they responded, what did they do, what they did not do at the scene, when did they cordon off the scene, who was inside the house. Were those people told to move to a certain direction of the house? We're expecting quite a lot of that scrutiny to continue to be placed in the spotlight this morning during that cross-examination of Advocate Zandile Mshololo, including why the scene was cordoned off only the second time when Sergeant Mthethwa and his colleague had arrived.
Yeah, that's our reporter, Chriselda Lewis, speaking to us from the High Court in Pretoria. And great detail there that she's giving us on the wrap-up of what we heard in the trial proceedings yesterday. And she'll be watching just as closely today as well as cross-examination continues there.